The basement of La Penta, it's WICR.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Sports File. I'm your host with the most, Jersey Joe Archino, back in action with Big Shot Rob. And Rob, there's some guys in this world who just aren't very good at making predictions, at prophesizing, and Dexter Miles from West Virginia, one of those players. Obviously, yesterday, a lot of talk, him saying, look, I give Kentucky their props. I mean, look, 36-0, not too bad. But he said tomorrow they're going to be 36-1. Well, it is Friday, and Kentucky is not 36-1, Rob. They are currently 36-0. I mean, it's just from the second that game started, it was a complete blowout. I mean, honestly, in the first 4 minutes of that game, it was over. Kentucky just routing West Virginia. And a lot of people thought West Virginia was going to give them a real battle. I mean, West Virginia had some size. They had some guys. You would have thought they were going to try the bully tactics, kind of like Cincinnati did. But no, this game was over before it even began. 78-39 from Kentucky. Rob, the thing I want to ask you is, if Kentucky runs the table, they go undefeated, 40-0, the first team to go undefeated since Bob Knight's undefeated Hoosiers team in 1976. Is this a historical Kentucky team? Because I was thinking about this. I don't know if I think this Kentucky team is better than the one that won in 2012 with Anthony Davis, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist. Is this a historical Kentucky team?
I think the other one is, Joe. The other championship team with Anthony Davis, I felt that team was more of, they didn't struggle whatsoever. There wasn't a team that gave them competition. Everything was a blowout that season. This year you're seeing more competition happening, and it's been tough for this Kentucky team. Yes, you know what, we look at that West Virginia game, they blow them out. Cincinnati gave them a run for their money, but I don't see them as Anthony Davis's team, the same thing.
I don't either, and I mean, they did have that one loss in the SEC tournament that season, but I mean, when I look at the talent of that team, I think they had definable guys where you put the ball in their hands, and it's just Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, whether it was Anthony Davis, so many guys in that team where they were legitimate stars. This Kentucky team is filled with good players. I mean, Willie Cauley-Stein, Towns is terrific. The Harrison twins are terrific. But I don't equate them the same way that I did with that Kentucky team back in 2012. Now, I think this team is tremendous, but for me, I think it says more about where college basketball is right now. The talent is just not as deep. When you have a team like Kentucky with all these players, a lot of schools just don't retain this talent anymore because guys, their foot is in the NBA as soon as it can be. And it's changed the dynamic. And I don't think the product of college basketball is as good anymore because, and we talk about this with people a lot, Rob, where a lot of people, maybe they like college basketball better than the NBA, but I like the NBA so much better just because the product is better. The college basketball product suffers because of the rules now, how guys just, they're in and they're out. What do you think, though?
I think, Joe, I prefer having kids stay 4 years in college. You know what? Yes, it's awesome. They go to the NBA, Joe. They're making a couple $1 million. Some of them making their big paychecks at the end of the day. But you have to look at it. Some of these guys that go to the draft, they leave their school early, maybe sophomore year. What happens if they don't pan out in the NBA? If you don't get your degree, then you're looking for a job. Yeah, you could be playing overseas, but you're not making the money you would have thought you were making in the NBA. And that's one thing that's been a killer for these kids. And I think the rule has to extend. You have to have them play all 4 years. You have to prepare these kids mentally because some of these kids go into the NBA, aren't prepared whatsoever. They're amazing in college. You know, one kid I look at, Austin Rivers. You know what? Austin, what will he always be known for, Joe? His shot versus UNC. That's the only reason why his draft stock was so high that year. And look at him in the NBA now. He's a bench rider for the Clippers. 10th pick in the draft for the Pelicans the same year they drafted Anthony Davis with the number 1 pick. And you know what? You know what? He's being paid money, but is it really something special? No. And you know what? These kids have to wake up. Stay the 4 years. Learn to win. Learn how to prepare yourself mentally for the NBA. Because the NBA is all a mental game. All about who's going to win. And you know what? That's one thing that needs to start changing in college basketball.
I'm with you. I think you made really good points, and it's cool. Sports Nation put out a tweet the other day of a picture with Kentucky, if Kentucky starters had stayed 4 years, if Arizona starters had stayed 4 years, so on and so forth. But I mean, it was amazing. If Kentucky had the guys from 2012 who stayed until their senior year, you would have had Anthony Davis, Julius Randle, Jeff Teague, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist all on the same team. I mean, think about that. It's just guys are rushing right out the door. Now, there are a lot of players who regardless of when they come out, are just talented. I mean, a guy like Kyrie Irving, a one and done. When he comes into the NBA, he's a true star. He's a guy who just gets it. Andrew Wiggins, maybe his game needed to be polished a little bit more, but I think we see he's just a supreme talent, a transcendent talent. Some guys have it, but some guys, like in Austin Rivers, are not polished enough. They're not ready for that next level. The jump is so seamless. I mean, the amazing thing, which I think a lot of people don't really see unless you really play in the game, is how much quicker it is. I mean, the way that players go from offense to defense in the NBA is about as seamless as you could be. It's the energy doesn't take as much. It's just flawless. Your just body can just do it. That's one of the hardest things, making that jump, and a lot of guys just aren't ready for it. But I think the product has suffered, and we see it a little bit in these games, but let's get a little bit back to the games that we had last night. Obviously, you had Notre Dame beating Wichita State 81-70. Wisconsin struggling mightily against North Carolina 79-72. And Arizona, again, struggling very heavily until maybe the last 2 minutes against Xavier, winning 68-60. But, Rob, I think when you look at these tournaments, a lot of these games, unless you're Kentucky just demolishing people, these games are really coming down to the last 5 minutes of a game. Who executes better? And we see a lot. When you take a Wisconsin and a North Carolina, both very good teams, but one of them executes fundamentally better in the last 5 minutes, and that's for me the calling card of the best teams in this tournament. Who executes better in the last 5 minutes of a game? The situational awareness tells you what you need to know about who's going to win it all. Kentucky all year has been the best team in the last 5 minutes of a game. North Carolina has not been a good team in the last 5 minutes of a game. But talk about that a little bit. I mean, how much of an edge does that give you? Because for me, I mean, when I watch Arizona, in the last 5 minutes, they did what they had to do. Didn't play a great game, but in those crucial minutes, nobody is better.
It's big, Joe. I mean, we could go back to last week, Joe. Notre Dame, their overtime win. What did it come down to? Defense at the end. Some big blocks at the end. We saw that block with about 2 seconds left in regulation, then another big block in overtime, and it's all about defense, and that's what these teams do. If you're able to execute, I'm seeing a lot of teams being held without field goals for like the last 5 minutes of games, and that's a big thing to do. You do that, you're winning the tournament. And some schools like Notre Dame, your Wisconsin, they know how to execute it perfectly. And when you execute it perfectly, you're going to be seeing yourself in the Final Four and eventually the national championship.
We are agreed on that. Now, we have some great action tonight as well. UCLA and Gonzaga, NC State and Louisville, Michigan State, Oklahoma, and Utah and Duke. Now, Rob, let's do a little picks for these so far. Obviously, UCLA is one of those teams where they were lucky to even get into the tournament. Now they're in the Sweet 16, so they've got to be happy, but I got a feeling their luck ends tonight against Mark Few and Gonzaga.
Oh, most definitely, Joe. They're lucky to even the second round. They played a 14 seed. If you get a 14 seed, you're obviously going to blow them out. They got the job done. I'm sorry, you're playing Gonzaga. When you play Gonzaga, it's coming to an end, unless Gonzaga is playing a team like North Carolina or Louisville.
We are agreed on that one. Now, this is an interesting one. Louisville, NC State. This is a really interesting matchup. NC State struggled a little bit against LSU, really got that lucky basket at the end of their game to move on. Then they really took care of business against Villanova in the next game. Now they play Louisville. Louisville has not had a really impressive showing. They're a team that really struggles scoring the basketball, really shooting. I think NC State's got a shot here. I mean, you give Louisville the edge because of their Rick Pitino, but I just think right now NC State's the better team. I have them winning this game.
Well, you know what, Joe? I'm going to disagree with you on this one. Yes, NC State has the momentum. I'm sticking with Rick Pitino. I'm sorry. This Louisville team, we're going to see them erupt tonight, Joe. They're winning it. I have them going to the Final Four this year.
Wow.
And I'm not standing away from this team.
Well, look. And the thing that I can't really dispute you from is in college basketball, really, because like we were talking about before, where the talent is such a drop-off to what it used to be because guys aren't developed enough now, Coaching makes all the difference in these games. When in doubt, pick the better coach. And for that reason, I mean, it's hard to pick against Rick Pitino here. The next one, Utah and Duke. Utah has had a nice run, but it comes to an end against Duke. Duke, I mean, and let me ask you this, Rob. Do you think Jahlil Okafor has been the best player in this tournament so far?
Yeah, he's been unstoppable, Jahlil Okafor. He rebounds. The kid is all over the boards. He scores. And he probably will be the number one pick in this year's NBA draft. And tonight, this Duke team is just going to crush Utah. They are on a roll right now. Another team that is going to be in the Final Four.
Now, I agree with you. I think the final is going to be Kentucky and Duke. The next matchup is one of the most interesting ones, and maybe I have a feeling I know where you're going based on one of your previous picks, but Michigan State and Oklahoma. Now, this is a really interesting matchup. Michigan State beating Virginia. A lot of people felt that Michigan State was the most underseeded team in this tournament. I especially did. I mean, a Tom Izzo team as a 7 seed, are you kidding me? Oklahoma, though, has been very impressive. They really played well in their matchups. They're a very good team. They have size. They have a lot of things to like about them. But again, Michigan State riding high off that Virginia. They have Tom Izzo, one of the best tournament coaches in NCAA history. Rob, where are you going with this one?
I'm going Michigan State. When you have on the national stage Magic Johnson coming to your team at the end of the game and telling you guys that's how you win games, you're going on. I'm sorry, they have the momentum on their side after beating Virginia. Virginia is one of the toughest teams to beat. And you know what? The momentum is still riding, and you can never count Tom Izzo out.
I'm with you. I mean, I think this is going to be a very close game. Oklahoma's very good and they have size, but in this situation, not picking against Tom Izzo. I think his team has been finding ways to win. They've changed their style too. I really like teams in this tournament who haven't had to play one way. They look at the matchup and they adjust to that matchup. A lot of these teams you've seen really try to just play that one way, and if they can't play that way, they're in trouble. Michigan State's done a good job of adjusting. Notre Dame has done a good job of adjusting. So I think Michigan State has the right adjustments for this game, and they get it done. But, I mean, it's just been a lot of fun so far this tournament. We're kind of getting into a situation where we're getting into what we expect. I think a lot of us expected Notre Dame and Kentucky to be playing each other. I mean, the only region where we really just had it wrong was the East. I mean, Virginia, a lot of people liked, but you all kind of knew that there was a chance for them because of the way they play on offense. Villanova, you never know. Jay Wright, it was a great season, but Villanova, they have had a bad record of disappointing us in this tournament.
Joe, they do it every single year, Nova. They always find a way to end up as a number 1 or 2 seed and fall apart, and it's just time where you start making your brackets, and it's like, will Nova even make it past the second round every year now?
I bought in this year, Rob. I was a sucker. I bought in. I loved their three-point shooting. I loved their movement on offense. I bought in. I was a sucker. Do not do it. But I love, obviously we have a rematch of the Elite Eight matchup last year with Wisconsin and Arizona, and a really good one. I mean, it was great last year. Honestly, this is as big a coin flip as you could get. Both of these teams are very similar. I mean, Frank the Tank Kaminsky against Brandon Ashley. Both teams have a great three-point shooting. They're fast. They do everything you would really want, and they both have great tournament coaches. I think this game is a coin flip. Now, Arizona has played very well to this point. I mean, that was their weakest showing in the tournament so far. Wisconsin really hasn't had a dominant performance yet. Rob, I mean, I don't want to get too far ahead, but just when you look at this game early, which way are you kind of leaning?
I'm leaning towards Wisconsin. Joe, it's going to be a 1-point game to end the game. And you know what? I'm going Wisconsin 68-67.
I'm with you. I think this comes down to who has the ball last. It really is. I mean, both of these teams are very similar. It's kind of going to be exactly the way it was last year. I think it goes either way. I'm going with Wisconsin, too. I just think Frank the Tank Kaminsky right now, put him in inside for some weird reason. I mean, he in the last couple of minutes of the game against North Carolina, he was playing a lot on top of the perimeter. But I mean, Frank the Tank, put him inside the paint. That's where he lives. That's where he thrives. In those crucial minutes, that's what you've got to do. And I'm sure that's what Bo Ryan and Wisconsin will do. That is going to wrap it up for this segment. When we come back, I don't even know what we'll get to. There's so much to talk about. We will see where we're going to go. So stay with us, and we will be right back.